What would you say if I told you I could get you 41% return on your money, risk-free?
I'd say you are completely full of crap. Because I am a suspicious person who thinks if something is too good to be true, it probably is. Fortunately for self-styled investment guru Chris Marco, who's just been charged with 50 counts of fraud, most people aren't like me.
Well, you spoke to him a year ago in his only ever interview.
I did. This is what he said. You convinced a lot of people to hand over a lot of money that you put in your own name in your own accounts. They must have trusted you.
Well, Ben, I guess they would have trusted me, but what we need to understand is I didn't convince anyone to do anything.
Doesn't look like a banker.
No, it's more Siegfried Roy. Chris's unorthodox appearance didn't deter more than 300 often very wealthy West Australians from handing over huge amounts of money for him to invest.
What I call them? Fun coupons. Yeah?
They weren't put off by the fact they often didn't understand the international debt markets he claimed to have tamed.
0, triple Bs, 0. And then that happens.
What is that?
Nor did they question why someone trading sovereign bond instruments, normally the preserve of national treasuries and global investment funds, was operating from an office above the IGA at the Broadway Fair shopping centre in Nedlands. And most bizarrely, nobody raised an eyebrow when he told them up front he didn't have a financial services licence and would be putting their hard-earned into his own personal bank account.
Shut up and take my money.
The people who gave Chris their money didn't stop and ask how it was all possible because they were guilty of the third deadly sin.
How much money did they give him?
$260 million over 20-odd years.
How did it last so long?
Because until he was shut down in 2018, Chris says he paid on time every time. If you entered into an agreement with him, gave him, say, $100,000 on the promise of a 30% return in 3 months, he would, at the end of 12 weeks, give you $130,000. He says he never welched.
How did he do it?
Well, he says he worked out a way to make money risk-free by buying and selling the debt raised by countries around the world. And there's a lot of debt to choose from. Australian governments, that's state and federal, owe about $1.3 trillion. We're paying about $30 billion a year in interest on that debt. Chris told his investors he knew how to get a slice of the action.
Okay, that's what Chris says. What does ASIC say?
The Australian Securities and Investments Commission, that's the corporate watchdog, says Marco's investment fund was modelled on this guy. Italian swindler Charles Ponzi convinced a great many Americans to hand him vast sums of money on the promise of a 50% profit within 45 days. During his heyday in the 1920s, he claimed he was able to achieve these stellar returns by buying and selling coupons that could be redeemed for postage stamps.
I'd like to see your most expensive stamp.
He took in the equivalent of $270 million US in today's money before people realised he wasn't investing in anything. He was simply paying early investors with the money given to him by later investors. It's a scam that's become known as
a Ponzi scheme.
That's where it comes from. ASIC froze Chris Marco's business 4 years ago, and government and private auditors and accountants went through the books like a dose of salts. They say they didn't find any evidence of actual returns from Chris's investments, but they did find this. That's a Ford Falcon XY GT HO Phase 3. Arguably Australia's most famous muscle car. When it was released in 1971, it was the fastest four-door vehicle in the world. Marco says he never drove the Falcon, along with a fleet of other iconic Australian vehicles, which I think is a great pity, because he was holding them on behalf of his investors. ASIC also found a bunch of properties, including this one in Mt Hawthorn. The real estate that houses Lupo Lab, which is a favoured dining destination of culinary trailblazers Troy McCanty and John Kizon, was one of 12 properties held in Marco's name. Again, he told investigators that while the assets officially belonged to him, they were really owned by his clients. The vehicles and properties were part of a diversification strategy, he said.
What happened when the business was frozen?
Well, what ASIC says is that with no new money coming in at the top, there was no money coming out at the bottom, and the investors who came to the party late or who reinvested their early returns didn't get paid. The company was wound up and the few assets that ASIC could find, the cars and the land, were sold or are being sold. The GT Falcon went for $1.15 million. Marco was declared bankrupt and the 64-year-old is now facing jail time after being charged with defrauding $36 million from 9 clients. One person is $10 million out of pocket.
Ouch. Punters must be furious.
A lot of them are. Many of them, believe it or not, are angry at ASIC. They wanted Chris to be able to keep doing what he was doing because most of his clients were paid. People like Steve Zielinski did very well out of him.
Haven't heard that name in a while.
Perth's stripper whisperer and the former owner of Raunchy Girls is one of Marco's most ardent supporters. Zielinski invested time and again with Marco and says he was consistently paid out on time and on the agreed terms.
Never felt it was a Ponzi scheme.
I had many, many people coming to me that were referred to by other investors for whatever reason.
So where did all the money go?
Of the $261.3 million deposited with Marco, auditors found $205.9 million was paid out, $20 million went on properties, $18.3 million on murky third-party deals, $11.6 million on failed bets on debt markets, $5.7 million on credit card expenses, and $2.7 million on those classic cars.
If I wanted to just take money, believe me, Ben, I could have taken $1 billion, I reckon. That's being a bit silly, but I could have taken a lot of money. I didn't.
And he didn't seem to lead an extravagant life. Back then, this was after his company was taken apart by the feds, but before he was charged, he said he never pressured any investors.
I didn't convince anyone of anything. All I said was I'm a private investor and this is what I do.
He said that when ASIC swooped, he was on the verge of signing a big investment deal that would have set up his clients for life.
Well, that's absolutely conclusive. There is no discussion on that at all.
And he says it's not a Ponzi.
I asked him straight out.
There is no Ponzi scheme. There never has been any Ponzi scheme.
Do you believe him?
Well, I couldn't say because I'd be in contempt of court, and I don't like taking unnecessary risks. I'm Ben Harvey. For more Up Late, click the subscribe button below.